Hello everyone, my name is Stephen Fleming, and today will be an episode of Steve Talks. I am starting a series called Steve Talks. It will be a number of Steve Talks, and it will be on different topics, different subjects. So, today I am going to talk about separation. All right. Separation. I have been attending Course in Miracles groups and for some time now, and one of the primary topics of discussion are about the separation or the quote-unquote fall of mankind, or the exit from the Garden of Eden, for those who wish to speak about it in biblical references. So I decided I was going to talk about this because separation is something that is currently practiced in many forms in the world that we experience today. So I wanted to really get into the meaning of separation and then talk about a few other things. So my first question, or the first thing that I want to address, is what is the meaning of the separation? Well, that is a good question. Separation in its purest form is the believing somehow that we are separate, that we are separate by space, we're separated or separate by time, we are separate in consciousness, and there's all sorts of separation. We are separate by race, or ethnicity. We are separate by if you are male or female. So separation or separateness, or being separate, or being different comes in many forms. But what is the true meaning of separation? Well, A Course in Miracles is a good place to start. And A Course in Miracles defines the separation as a faulty formulation of reality with no effect at all. A Course in Miracles gives another definition of separation. It defines it as our detour into fear. Fundamentally, it comes from an aspect of the human condition in wanting or desiring to be right. And in that wanting and desiring to be right, then at that point, judgment ensues based on who is not in our understanding of things, of who we are or what we stand for. So basically, it's I'm right and everyone else is wrong. That is a general understanding of separation. Being diverse is not there's nothing. I don't want to use right or wrong, but being diverse is not what I'm talking about. Being different is not what I'm talking about. What I am referring to is the thought process of people in the human condition, as far as If someone represents a thought process that is somehow different from my thought process, then I'm right and they are wrong. That is what I'm referring to as far as separation. So as far as male or female, if I am a male, then, women don't know any better. Oh, makes sense. Must be a woman that thought of that. Things like that. That type of ideology and that type of rhetoric is what I'm talking about. Or as far as a woman. As far as thinking that all men are, I don't know, somehow simple or simple-minded, a simple-minded man, and things like that. I've heard males and females refer to the other sex in ways that are judgmental, and that is what I'm referring to as far as separation. So it's not as far as ethnicity based, however, that can be a category. It is not sex based, however, that can be a category. It can be many categories. It can be religion. It can be a number of things. But it is the wanting to be right and not just basically respecting diversity, respecting someone coming from a different path, a different point of view, and just respecting it and embracing it. And it's like, wow, I never thought of it like that. I never thought, this is, what you go through, because, I was going through my own journey, and not condemning and not pointing the finger and judging just based on the fact that this is a person or an idea that is somehow different from your own. And that is the whole heart of separation, or the divisiveness that comes from separatist type thinking. So what caused the separation? Well, what caused the separation? To be honest with you, no one really factually knows what caused the separation. There is a lot of speculation. Some people, again, believe that what caused the separation was somehow being ousted from the Garden of Eden. As far as biblical standpoints, it's important to point out that was a story, but the Garden of Eden, if we want to refer to that, was not a place or a garden at all. As a matter of fact, the Course in Miracles specifically states that it actually represents a state of consciousness that we had back then, or back at this particular time, where we were in this Garden of Eden, where we lacked nothing. For God had already given us everything. So there was no lack of any kind, and we did not perceive of any lack. And it was only until we begin to perceive of needs. It is only when we begin to somehow see ourselves different in form, or there was some sort of a subtle difference, and we begin to see these differences, and we begin to perceive ourselves to need things, and that is how fear came in. It is described, or one way of describing what caused the separation was in chapter 27, part 8, paragraph 6, refers to a tiny mad idea which came about in our consciousness, and it just began to grow from there. And so basically man forgot to laugh. And became enmeshed basically in these bodies, and began to truly believe that he was this body, as opposed to just playing a role. Like an actor or actress plays a role in a play or in a movie or something like that. These actors or actresses who may get Academy Awards, they don't somehow identify completely with their roles. They realize that it is just a role. Well, essentially, we forgot that we were just playing a role. And we begin to identify with the role. Okay. That is what A Course in Miracles states essentially took place as far as a separation. Again, it's very speculative, but it really doesn't matter because we practice separation in limitless forms today. I have merely compiled a few categories of the ways that we practice separation, but that is one of the ways that Course in Miracles states that it all started. So, what are some categories that can contribute to separation? Well, again, these categories by themselves are just basically differences, but when we then identify with and then put ourselves in a position of being right, wanting to be or needing to be right in all things, which one would possibly want to ask themselves, do I desire to be right or do I desire for happiness? Do I desire to be happy? Because that right there can actually do a whole lot to undo separation consciousness. Categories that contribute to separation are sex. Or whether you're a male or a female, that's a category. And with a certain type of thinking, that can contribute to separation. Ethnicity, just a category. However, with a certain type of thinking, that can contribute to separation. Racism is a form that ascribes to ethnicity or separatist-based thinking based on one's ethnicity. Social class. Social class is something else. That's just a difference, just another difference. We live in a very diverse world. However, with a certain type of thinking, that can contribute to separatist type thinking. Nationality, what country you're from, what country you identify with. In one aspect, it's just a difference. That's all it is. We're in a diverse world. But however, with a certain type of mentality, that can contribute to separatist type thinking as far as a nationalist or someone who is only about their country and everybody else is wrong. Their country is right. Every other country is wrong. It's the same thing. Religion. Religion is one of the big ones. That's why many people say, hey, they have it as a rule. Whatever you do, don't talk about religion. And the next one is politics or political affiliation. That's the other one that people say don't talk about because these can bring about very heated debates in our desire in this human condition to be right. And when we are right, then that automatically casts the whoever doesn't agree with us or whoever is not in our in agreement or thinks like us or is like us, then they are wrong. If we are right, then they are wrong. Okay, so again, sex, ethnicity, social class, nationality, religion, and politics can all be contributors. They can all be contributors, and it's very interesting. Okay, so one thing I want to point out in as far as separation is that separation, is a false concept. It is a false idea that has been introduced into this world through fear. In our desire or wanting to be separate, we perceive ourselves as separate. We perceive time and space to separate us further. But all of that is an illusion, my brothers and sisters. For there is no such thing as separation. Separation is the one thing that you cannot have. For everything is of God, and there is no separation from God. There is no separation from your brother or your sister. What you see, as far as if you see someone, who's on the other side of the room, you see someone else who is maybe on some stairs, halfway up some stairs. All of these are illusions that have been made up in your mind that wants to maintain the time and space belief, which that doesn't exist either, brothers and sisters. Separation does not exist. We are all connected. We are all united. So what affects you affects me. The thought of separation ascribes to what affects me, what affects you, and there's no you and me, and there's no unless we're married or something. And no, this is a falsity. This is a falsity. This is a falsity. For there is no separation. There is only unity. There is only unity and the illusion of separation. That's all there is. So what affects you will still affect me, although I may not know exactly how it's affecting me or why it's affecting me, but it's affecting me. What affects me will still affect you. You may not know why or how it's affecting you, but it's still affecting you. For everything is circular, brothers and sisters. And on the flip side, if I offer service to a brother or sister, or if one brother or sister offers service to another brother or sister, a miracle or sees their brother and sister, sees the light, or sees the perfection in their brother and sister, it works the same way. As you perceive the light and the perfection in your brothers and sisters, so will you perceive the perfection in yourself. Or vice versa. As you perceive the perfection in yourself, so will you perceive the perfection in your brothers and sisters, because it's all circular. So, through the eyes of love, seeing differences is completely okay. Seeing someone who is, for example, let's say if I am a Democrat, if I vote or have a historical voting of being a Democrat, it is completely okay to embrace my brother and sister my brother or sister who votes Republican, who is a conservative voter. If I say am a heterosexual male, it is completely okay to embrace my brother or sister who is non-heterosexual, or is homosexual or bisexual. It is completely okay, where I am not condemning them or they are not condemning me, and there is no condemnation or judgment going on. There is simply unity and brotherhood. And that is okay. Now, these things seem to be completely against the world's view, but the world's view is skewed. The world's view is falsity. It's almost upside down. It's almost upside down thinking. Now, right now, I want to discuss the fact that as far as separatism or separatist type thinking, regardless of whatever category it's in, there is no big or small. Okay, so it doesn't matter if that category has to do with the sex of a person, as far as it being male or female, or it doesn't matter if it has to do with their ethnicity, or whether we're dealing with racism or not. It doesn't matter if we're dealing with social class. It doesn't matter if we're dealing with someone's sexual preference. Doesn't matter if we're dealing with politics or religion. There is no big or small. The only value is the value that we put on it. So, where some would say, I think that racism is the, racism is just another form of separatism, brothers and sisters. Just another form, nothing more. Just another form. Now, there are a lot of opportunities. There are a lot of opportunities to heal in regards to some of these forms that are perceived by the mass public as big or big versus small. So perhaps there are numerous opportunities, but it's all the same. It's all separation. It all divides it. It's all divisive. It all divides us, and that's just the bottom line. If you just truly remove or step back from the emotion, then it is a little easier to see how separatist type thinking in any form, in any category, is not conducive to brotherhood. Is not conducive to unity. That's just what it is. Either it separates or it doesn't. Either it separates us or it doesn't. Either it divides us or it doesn't. Doesn't matter if we're talking about ethnicity. Doesn't matter if we're talking about men versus women or the sex. Doesn't matter if we're talking about if we're talking about politics. Seems like that's a big thing today, but it doesn't matter if we're talking about politics. It doesn't matter if we're talking about religion or your religious beliefs, or if you are an atheist. How does that make you any less of a human being than someone who's not an atheist? What makes someone that is not an atheist better or superior than someone who is an atheist? What makes a person better or superior, or what makes a person that is lesser or inferior based on a superficiality such as ethnicity? What truly makes someone superior or inferior based on anatomically, as far as whether you are a male or a female? We are all created as equals. We are all created as equals. There is no superior or inferior with any of us. We are all brothers. We are all children of God. And to be quite honest, brothers and sisters, when we associate ourselves with these categories, we actually diminish ourselves. We do not somehow increase ourselves. We diminish ourselves because we are infinite beings, brothers and sisters. We are infinite. We are creators of worlds. We are made or created in the image and likeness of God. We are created in the image and likeness of love. There is nothing that love cannot do. So when we then associate ourselves with anything that has to do in this world and we proclaim that to be us, what that does, brothers and sisters, is that limits our power. What that does is that puts us in a box. What that does, what that says is that although I am timeless, although I am eternal, although I have never tasted death and I have never been born, I was here before the stars were created. I was here before the universe. But yet when I associate myself with a body, with when I associate myself with being a black man, or when I associate myself with being a white woman, or when I associate myself with being a Republican, or when I associate myself with being a Democrat, or when I associate myself with anything that is of this world, and I take on all of the programmings and associations of whatever that is that I now associate myself with. So as being, for example, a black man in America, then now I associate myself with the programmings of a black man in America. So now I associate myself with being victimized by this country. I associate myself with being, as far as perceived negatively by this country. This is what I'm talking about, okay? We are infinite. We are vast. And there is nothing that we cannot do. And again, it demeans us and makes us small in order to put us in a box or compartmentalize us, where we now are associated with some sort of demographic category. So this is what it means by taking away our power and getting enmeshed in the world. We are not of this world. We are spiritual beings. That is our truth. That is our origin. Our spiritual origin is love. We were created by love, therefore we are love. And nowhere in here for sex, ethnicity, social class, nationality, religion, or politics do I see something that can actually encompass all that love encompasses. That is what I'm talking about, brothers and sisters. It makes us small. It makes us limited. It limits us. And as we perceive ourselves as limited, then we are limited, which is why we may feel powerless, which is why we are fearful and get frightened, and we feel unsafe and have to live behind bars as far as, on our doors, and have security systems and things like that so we can feel safe. And all people have to do is basically start ranting and raving and talking about, hey, these people over here are to blame for whatever it is that you're going through. And because we're so fearful and fearfully motivated, then we go ahead and, just like sheep, we go and vote for whatever it is that needs to be voted for, because we want to feel safe. Again, and the reason why this is all occurring is because we have made ourselves small, and not vast, and not limitless, and not eternal, okay? And that is what I am talking about when I say that associations with all of these categories, it limits us, it makes us small. Okay, yeah. Next question. How can we heal the separation? Okay. Well, the first thing that is required in healing any type of separatism, separatist type thinking, is to have an open mind. When one ascribes to separation, one basically closes their mind off to any other outlook or way of perceiving things. So one becomes closed-minded. So the reverse is necessary in order to change things. And once one has an open mind and one is at that point willing to see or look or perceive things differently, is when things start to change. So it requires open-mindedness or a willingness to see or perceive things differently. So open-minded or willing to see things differently. Okay, so because I am a quote-unquote black man, and this other person who I disagree with is a white man. And so open-mindedness and being willing to see things differently, that is something that starts within here. And it's like, I know how things are from my perspective, but what would be from this person, Bob's perspective over here? Bob is a white man. What are things from Bob's perspective? What is he talking about? And so at that point, now that I am willing to see things or perceive things differently, then I will begin to see things differently. Once I am willing and open-minded, things begin to occur, thoughts begin to happen, shifts happen in perception and consciousness that will then allow me to see from Bob's perspective. Perhaps Bob didn't know any better. Perhaps Bob did feel that, all African Americans are this, or all African Americans can do that, or whatever. But perhaps that's what Bob was taught. Perhaps where Bob grew up, Bob didn't know any black friends. Perhaps where Bob grew up, or in the household that Bob grew up, perhaps Bob's parents were a certain way. Perhaps some of the teachings that Bob learned as a child came from his first teachers, which our first teachers are our parents. So, if we have parents that are racists, or bigots, or racist, then, chances are high that we will follow that same teaching. So from that standpoint, how would I feel if I had the same parents? Would I somehow feel the same way? And in any category, in any type of thinking, we don't have to just talk about racism. In any type of category, when you are open-minded enough and willing to see or perceive things different, or see things from another's point of view, at that point, there is a compassion that begins to come over. And at that point, you begin to have compassion for Bob and for the way Bob grew up and for things that happened to Bob, which have led Bob to where he is, which have actually led Bob to you. And so you have an opportunity to actually change Bob's perspective on, quote unquote, black people, for example. Just using this same example. You have an opportunity to change, to be yourself while being yourself, and change Bob's perspective through love, through compassion, showing him the very best. Seeing or perceiving Bob as your brother. And from this compassion, at this point, we forgive, we release. Whatever negative feelings that we were feeling, we forgive it and release it. Whatever negative feelings I was feeling about Bob, I forgive it, I release it, I let it go. Bob is my brother. And as brothers and sisters, as you release and as you begin to unsubscribe to the associations of being this or associations of being that, as you reject those associations, it doesn't mean anything about you ignoring your ethnicity. It doesn't mean anything like you're somehow ashamed or do not want to acknowledge your ethnicity. No, this is not about that. This means that you refuse to make yourself small by an association with that which is true, which is not really you. For we have chose to incarnate in these bodies. For whatever reason that we chose to incarnate in these bodies. For whatever reason I chose to incarnate as a black man. For whatever reason Bob chose to incarnate as a white man. This does not mean that in some previous incarnation that Bob was not a black man. This does not mean in a previous incarnation that I was not a white man. For my origin is spirit. And there are no such thing as black spirits and white spirits. There are no such thing as Hispanic spirits and Asian spirits. Spirit is spirit. So whatever we chose to incarnate in, we chose to incarnate that into that for our highest good. It is all for our highest good. There are no victims. No one is superior or inferior to anyone. We are all here together, whether we perceive it or not. We are all here to be there for each other. We are all connected. So what affects Bob affects me. And what affects me affects Bob. So what affects you affects me. I may not even know you. And what affects me affects you. You may not even know me. And that is the truth, brothers and sisters. That is the truth. So, an open-mindedness or willingness to see or perceive things differently, and then compassion and forgiveness, and release it and let it go. Whatever it is that I held against Bob because he was somehow different from me, it's not even important. For Bob is my brother. Bob is my brother. We don't have to look alike. We don't have to be in the same earthly family. We do not have to be related by blood or by DNA. Spirit transcends blood or DNA. Spirit is our original state before we chose to come here, not the other way around. These are things that many of us already know, but sometimes we need to just be reminded. Sometimes we get caught up in the trivialities of life and being trivial and looking at whatever we look at for pleasant diversions, watching whatever is going on in politics. Politics has become very entertaining lately. And getting caught up in that and then basically forgetting the fact that we are spirit and we're just basically in the human experience. Spirits experiencing the human experience. That's all. That's all it is. And so in forgiving, then releasing the fear that we have of anything that is different from us, anything that we may not understand completely or fully. As we forgive ourselves for our misperceptions in wanting to perceive ourselves as right and others as wrong. Now that we have begun to forgive and release these things, then also we are releasing fear, because now it's okay. It's okay. Everything is it's okay. And while I may still have differences of opinion with Bob, Bob is still my brother. And with that compassion now, even though we have differences of opinion, I respect Bob in his opinions. And Bob, even though he still has his opinions, he respects me and my opinions. And we see each other as brothers. And we hug each other and we say, welcome, brother. How have you been, brother? This is what I'm talking about as far as healing separation or healing separatist type thinking. So, this is a short talk, Steve Talks. I will have many more on other topics, but this is Steve Talks on separation. And I want to thank you for watching, and I want to wish you a good evening. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening, brothers and sisters.